Imagine this. You're in a casino in Las Vegas. You just won $500, excited and pumped up, and you decide to keep playing. Just one more round, you tell yourself. 5 minutes later, you're broke. And as you walk away from the table, you can't help but ask, why did I do that? I knew I should have stopped. Richard Thaler, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, spent his entire career trying to answer that very question. He said, people don't behave rationally the way economic models assume. We misbehave, and that's what makes the world real. From paying $6 for a latte but hesitating to leave a $1 tip, to investors panic selling their stocks the moment prices drop. It all comes down to one truth. Emotions control our money, not logic. Thaler's book, Misbehaving, isn't just a challenge to traditional economics. It's a mirror, reflecting who we really are, emotional investors living in a world that only pretends to be rational. So if you've ever thought your decisions were driven by logic, this video might just make you think again. Part 1. When rationality exists only in textbooks. For decades, economics was built on one simple but deeply flawed assumption, that humans are rational beings. Classical economic models assumed we always know what we want, always choose the best option, and always act rationally to maximize our benefit. But Richard Thaler, back when he was a young professor at the University of Rochester, started noticing something strange. No one around him behaved like those rational agents described in textbooks. A student would take out a loan to buy a sports car, but hesitate to spend a few bucks on a textbook. A colleague would know that beer at a bar costs twice as much as at the supermarket, yet still go out because we already made plans. And in investing, millions of people would dump their stocks out of fear of losing more, even when the odds of recovery were still intact. Thaler realized that humans aren't econs, the perfectly rational economic beings found in theory, but real humans driven by emotion, fear, and all kinds of irrational impulses. And when those irrational actions repeat often enough, they form patterns of their own, an economy driven not by formulas, but by feelings. Thaler once said that in his early research days, classical economists used to mock him. Richard, if people are as irrational as you claim, how can markets even function? He would simply smile and reply, it's because people are irrational that markets are as chaotic as they are today. Because markets don't run on logic, they run on fear, greed, and blind confidence. Just like homebuyers in 2007 who believed prices will always go up, or crypto investors in 2021 who thought every crash is just temporary. That's not stupidity, it's instinct. Thaler called it human misbehavior. Small deviations from logic that end up shaping massive consequences for the entire economy. And from that realization, behavioral economics was born, a field that bridges psychology and economics to explain why people keep making choices they know are irrational. So if you think you invest, spend, or make decisions rationally, think again. The market and life itself has never been driven by pure logic, but by emotions, cleverly disguised as reason. Part 2. The Endowment Effect. When we love what we own more than what we need. One autumn morning at Cornell University, Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman ran a simple experiment. They handed a group of students white ceramic mugs with the school logo on them. Each student got to keep their mug, and after a few minutes, they were told they could sell it. Meanwhile, other students who didn't receive mugs were allowed to make offers to buy them. The result? The owners refused to sell for anything less than $7 on average, while the buyers were only willing to pay about $3. Nothing about the mugs had changed. Same size, same logo, same cheap ceramic. But in just a few minutes, something worthless became mine. And once it was mine, its value doubled, at least in the mind of its owner. Thaler called this the endowment effect, one of the deepest system errors hardwired into the human brain. We tend to overvalue what we already have, simply because it belongs to us. That's why so many investors hold on to losing stocks, telling themselves it'll bounce back. Or why some people refuse to sell their homes, even when they're drowning in debt, because they've become attached to it. We don't measure things by their real value. We measure them by the emotions tied to ownership. We don't keep an item, a job, or even a relationship because it's good for us, but because we've gotten used to it being ours. In investing, Thaler saw this as a deadly trap. It keeps investors from cutting their losses, changing strategies, or seizing better opportunities, all because they can't let go. He once wrote, "People feel the pain of loss more intensely than the pleasure of gain. Losing $1,000 hurts more than the joy of gaining $1,000. That's why we'd rather cling to a bad stock and hope than sell it and face reality." If you've ever kept an old car just because it still runs, or piled up things in your garage in case you need them someday, you're living inside the trap of the endowment effect. It tricks us into thinking that letting go equals losing, when sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward. Thaler once shared a story. He owned a stock that had dropped 40%. His friends told him, just wait a little longer. But he knew that was instinct talking, not logic. He sold it. A few months later, the company went bankrupt. From that moment on, Thaler realized something profound. Investing isn't about picking the right stock. It's about choosing the right emotion to act on. We love what we own more than what actually serves us. But true wealth isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. Because in investing and in life, sometimes losing a little today is the only way to avoid losing everything tomorrow. Part 3. Money has feelings too. The mental accounts in our minds. Imagine you've just won $1,000 in a lottery. You're thrilled, so you take $300 and treat yourself to a fancy dinner, telling yourself, it's okay, this isn't my salary, it's prize money. But if you had to spend that same $300 today to fix your car, you'd probably feel like you lost $300, even though, in both cases, your bank balance goes down by the same amount. That's what Richard Thaler called mental accounting. It's one of the most fascinating discoveries in behavioral economics. We don't see money as numbers. We see it through emotion. In our minds, we divide money into invisible accounts: salary money, bonus money, savings, lucky money, investment money. And we treat each account differently, even though, economically, it's all the same money. Thaler once shared a funny story about a married couple. They had $5,000 in credit card debt with 18% interest rate, but they also kept $10,000 in a savings account earning 2%. When Thaler asked, why didn't they use their savings to pay off the debt? The husband said, that's our vacation fund. Thaler laughed and realized something profound. People don't think like calculators. We feel money based on what it means to us. A lucky dollar from a prize feels easier to spend. A hard-earned dollar feels sacred. And an investment dollar often gets judged emotionally, not rationally. This explains why we splurge easily when we get a bonus, but mourn deeply when our stocks fall. Or why some people gamble their profits but never whisk their original capital, because in their minds, they're playing with the house's money. Thaler pointed out that mental accounting gives us an illusion of control. We think labeling our money helps us manage it better, but in truth, it often limits our flexibility and makes us make irrationally rational decisions. Think about crypto investors in 2021. When prices doubled, they treated their gains as house money and poured even more into the market. When prices crashed, they held on, saying, I haven't lost until I sell. They created two mental accounts, one for excitement and one for fear. And in the end, both went empty. The truth is, mental accounting isn't necessarily bad. It helps us control spending and set boundaries. But when we're unaware of it, it becomes a psychological trap, driving emotional decisions that protect our feelings, not our finances. Money itself doesn't have emotions, but people do. And those emotions make us love, fear, or misjudge money instead of treating it as a simple tool. Understanding your own mental accounts is the first step to breaking free from emotional spending and investing. Because sometimes how you think about money matters even more than how you make it. Part 4. The Imperfect Market, when the crowd also misbehaves. For decades, economists believed that markets are always right. If someone mispriced an asset, the logic went, others would quickly buy low, sell high, and correct the mistake. In the end, the invisible hand would always bring everything back to balance. Sounds reasonable, until you look out the window. Because the real world doesn't follow neat equations. The market isn't a machine, it's a crowd. A crowd made up of emotional, imperfect human beings. Richard Thaler once said, "Markets are made up of people, and if people aren't perfect, markets can't be either." He pointed to example after example that baffled traditional economists. The dot-com bubble in 2000, the housing crash in 2008, and countless smaller frenzies since, from GameStop to Dogecoin to meme stocks. In every case, people weren't acting out of logic, but out of collective emotion, the fear of missing out, the fear of losing, and the fear of standing alone. Thaler called it herd behavior, the instinct to move with the crowd. It doesn't just make investors chase rumors, it creates the illusion of certainty. If everyone's doing it, it must be right. Think back to 2021. Bitcoin had soared past $60,000. Reddit traders were shouting to the moon, and millions of everyday Americans opened trading accounts just so they wouldn't be left behind. No one asked what anything was really worth. What they wanted wasn't profit, it was belonging. But as Thaler reminded us, when everyone is sure prices can only go up, that's exactly when they start to fall. Because crowds don't just create trends, they amplify mistakes. When bad news hits, the same crowd that drove prices up suddenly panics and sells everything, causing chain reactions no economic model can predict. Thaler studied individual investors and found something striking. They hate losing twice as much as they enjoy winning. That's why people hold on to losing stocks too long and sell winning stocks too early. A deeply human reaction, but a completely irrational one economically. In the end, a crowd is nothing more than a collection of individual fears. And when everyone misbehaves at the same time, the market becomes a mirror, not of true value, but of collective emotion. Thaler didn't deny that markets self-correct. He simply said, they don't do it quickly, and they don't do it accurately. Stock prices may reflect information, but not immediately, and not always correctly. To Thaler, the market is like a funhouse mirror. It reflects reality, but distorts it through emotion, rumor, and fear. And if you don't recognize that distortion, you'll get lost in the illusion, where greed and fear take turns steering the wheel. Markets are imperfect because humans are imperfect. Understanding this doesn't make you cynical. It makes you realistic. Let the crowd's emotion be your lesson, not your downfall. Because in a world where everyone misbehaves, the calmest mind holds the real advantage. Part 5. The small nudge
that creates big change. Some changes in life don't come from revolutions. They come from a gentle push. Richard Thaler called it a nudge, a small, subtle push that helps people act differently without forcing or commanding them to. And the fascinating thing is, these tiny nudges can change entire economies, even reshape the behavior of millions. Let's start with a simple story. In the early 2000s, Thaler and his colleague Cass Sunstein studied a very everyday problem. Why do so many Americans fail to save for retirement, even though they know they should? It wasn't because they were poor. It was because they procrastinated. They were afraid to choose an investment plan, afraid of making mistakes, and so they told themselves, "I'll deal with it tomorrow." Instead of trying to educate people with financial lectures, Thaler decided to change the decision environment. Rather than asking employees to actively enroll in a retirement plan, he proposed automatic enrollment, meaning if you do nothing, you're already signed up. And the result? Retirement saving rates skyrocketed. No one was forced. They could still opt out, but most didn't. Just one small nudge in how choices were designed changed the behavior of millions. This story reveals something profound. People don't lack information, they lack motivation to act. And sometimes all it takes is to adjust the context of the decision. Thaler realized we're not rational machines. We're emotional beings living in a world full of temptations. So, instead of trying to fix human nature, he suggested designing smarter systems around that nature. For example, want to eat healthier? Put fruit at eye level and hide the sweets. Want to save more? Automatically divert 10% of your paycheck into an investment fund. Want to exercise regularly? Schedule workouts with a friend, because we hate letting others down more than ourselves. That's what a nudge is, a gentle push that helps you act better without pressure. On a larger scale, this idea sparked a policy revolution. Countries like the UK, the US, and Singapore created nudge units, teams that designed smarter choices to encourage people to save more, get vaccinated, or use less energy. And their power doesn't come from authority, but from understanding people. Because sometimes, instead of shouting, "Change now," you just need to quietly turn the door handle in a new direction. Thaler once said, "If you want people to do better, don't judge them. Help them make better decisions." That truth goes far beyond economics. It applies to life itself. Because we all misbehave sometimes. The difference is, the wise ones know how to put themselves in environments where it's easier to behave better. You don't always need force to change the world, just the right nudge. So, start with small nudges in your own financial life. Auto-investing, setting spending limits, or simply making your money a little harder to waste. Because big changes always begin with small decisions. And as Thaler proved, human behavior may be irrational, but it can be guided with intelligence and empathy.
Part 6. Lessons for Investors. Understand yourself before you try to understand the market. Richard Thaler once joked, "The market isn't always wrong. It's just the people in it who aren't quite right." It sounds funny at first, but it's one of the harshest truths in investing. Most of us enter the market with the same belief. If we study long enough, read enough books, and analyze deeply enough, we'll eventually understand the market. But what Thaler kept reminding us throughout Misbehaving is this: the market isn't a puzzle to solve. It's a mirror reflecting human behavior. And if you don't understand yourself first, then every number, chart, and model is just an illusion of control.
Think back to the last time you took a big loss. It probably wasn't because you lacked knowledge. It was because you couldn't handle how you felt when prices crashed. Or the time you sold too early, afraid of losing your gains. That's loss aversion, exactly as Thaler described. We don't invest with pure logic. We invest with a heartbeat that races every time the price moves. And the danger is, we often believe we're being rational, when we're really just rationalizing our emotions. Thaler said that throughout his career, he never tried to teach people how to beat the market. He taught them how not to shoot themselves in the foot. That's why he favored strategies that are simple, automatic, and strip away as much emotion as possible, like dollar-cost averaging, low-cost index funds, and the discipline of long-term holding. Not because they're the smartest strategies, but because they're the least misbehaving ones. A true investor, in Thaler's view, isn't someone who predicts market trends correctly, but someone who deeply understands their own limits. They know they're prone to herd behavior, so they set clear trading rules in advance. They know they fear losses, so they diversify and manage risk consciously. They know greed is instinctive, so they build lock mechanisms to stop themselves from chasing hype. Because investing, at its core, isn't a battle against others, it's a battle against yourself. Thaler didn't teach us how to be geniuses. He taught us how to be smartly ordinary. Stay calm when others panic. Be patient when others give up. And when the market goes wild, remember, your first reaction isn't always the right one. Successful investing doesn't start with understanding the market. It starts with understanding how you respond to it. Because if you can't manage yourself, no strategy, no matter how clever, will save you. As Thaler proved, we all misbehave. But the wise build systems that protect them from their own irrationality. Maybe what makes Richard Thaler's Misbehaving truly special isn't that he proved people are irrational, but that he showed us how to live peacefully with that irrationality. He never tells us to be perfect. He simply shows us that if we can recognize when we misbehave, we can design our lives and even our portfolios to avoid making the same mistakes again. Because in the end, markets will always change, but human nature won't. And the only real difference between winners and losers is how well they understand themselves. If you're an investor, if you've ever panicked when prices fell or regretted selling too soon, this book will make you look in the mirror, not to blame yourself, but to grow, one decision at a time. I've left the link to Misbehaving, The Making of Behavioral Economics down below in the description. Take some time to read it or share it with someone on the same investing journey as you. Because before you learn how to beat the market, you need to learn how not to lose to yourself.